They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
Sending poets.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas. Our goal is to understand metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. My name is John. With me is Bob and Tucker. Good morning, you guys.
Howdy.
And in the tradition of Monty Python, now for something completely different. So if you've been listening, you can look through our episodes, done a lot of stuff about consciousness, sci-fi things, all beautiful, topics we love talking about. Today, we are going to talk about LGBT stuff. This is a topic that's very near and dear to me. I want to start right away saying I am no expert in this, but I am the father of a trans 16-year-old, and I've learned a ton of stuff I'm very excited to share. It just in the same spirit of everything we've talked about, I'm super excited that you guys are interested to be part of this. So long time coming is something that I wanted to do and wasn't sure when, it would, the timing would be right. And last, wrapping up all the three body stuff the last few episodes, Bob, thank you for suggesting.
Let's say like 5 episodes straight. I think we did at least one on the 3-body problem, the series, and then 4
right
the solution. So we need a palate cleanser, I think, here.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and so I, and it just felt really good to do this now. So, buckle up. I want to start in a place here with that might not seem related at all, but years ago I saw a amazing video on YouTube by this guy Tom Scott. He's a British YouTuber. I haven't seen a ton of his stuff, but the handful of things I have seen have been really, really well done. He's really one of those guys, kind of like Veritasium, just seems like really well researched, really passionate about, putting out really interesting, intriguing, contemplative, thought-provoking content. And he did a Royal Institute talk, and I think for all intents and purposes, I think it's very similar to like a TED Talk, but in London. And the title of this is "There is no algorithm for truth." And again, I'll put the link in the episode notes, but I highly recommend it. It was really, really a really great talk. The point that really stuck with me is he was describing about the challenge that social media companies must struggle with of, do we censor this or not? How do we know what's okay to allow on our platform and what we should just have a hard line, this is not okay? And the way he described it, and this has stuck with me ever since, and I've used this to describe things many, many times, but he described it as a kind of linear spectrum, polar opposites. On one end is the echo chamber, and I'm guessing that sounds familiar to most people, but just in case, like the echo chamber is where no dissenting opinions allowed. You either agree with us or you're wrong. No room for disagreement.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other end of the spectrum is what he described as the Nazi bar, which sounds maybe a little like intense, but it's everything is allowed. There are no rules. Absolutely everyone's allowed into the bar. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Everything is allowed. And the the thing that stuck with me is I recognized at some point that I think I had grown up. I don't think this was something that was taught to me. I think I just, the way my brain developed, but I had this tendency to think in strict binary terms with a lot of things. I was very comfortable just kind of in my thought process of trying to analyze or figure something out. I was very comfortable just trying to figure out what are the two extremes. Is it this one or is it that one? And through just growth, and honestly through like writing haikus with my wife, I got to this like place where I just started appreciating how that probably wasn't very helpful to me to be so rigid and strict on this, like it's which polar end are we, and just completely ignoring the middle part, which I think I feel very strongly now, like that's probably where you're more likely to find truth, somewhere in that gray area. And this has been very meaningful to me, just like in my growth as a human. I wish I could remember exactly when I saw that video. It was before my son came out as trans, so a lot of these things were kind of already happening before I even had any idea about what transgenderism was. But it was helping me kind of think about how my brain processed my thoughts and stuff. And it's been a while since we've shared actual poetry, but I have this haiku that I wrote at the time, that I'd like to share in the interest of sending poets, right? The echo chamber, probably a dreadful place for conversation. And don't you think that kind of tracks? You can't really have a conversation if you're in a conversation is like exchange of ideas.
We repeat
Yes.
that one more time, please. One more time.
Sure. Yeah. The echo chamber, probably a dreadful place for conversation. Wow.
That's really good, brother. That's really, really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and the idea again is like exchanging ideas, and is a beautiful thing. And I think especially if you're interested in like what's truth, like, that's part of our opening line, metaphorical truths and the beauty we see in life. To discourage different ideas just seems not helpful in the long run. It seems very limiting. So these things kind of were in my head space. And one of the first things that actually popped in my radar, I suppose, about transgenderism at all was the J.K. Rowling controversy. And I don't want to spend the whole time talking about that, but I think it's worth bringing up because my memory was that, there was a huge amount of backlash and people were just saying that J.K. Rowling was a horrible person. And there was a specific phrase that I remember from back then, and I still see it from time to time. And it's around this question, are trans women women? Or are trans men men? And again, I'm no expert in this, but I feel very passionately that if the intent is to elicit this binary response by asking that question, I just don't think that's as helpful as trying to elicit a conversation. What are the thoughts about it? Sure, start with that. Maybe if you want to start with that as where are you on this? But idea, are trans women women or not? Yes or no? Give me a yes or no. Just tell me yes or no. It just doesn't seem as helpful. Maybe as a starting point, okay,
like
but the
purity test, right? Like some kind of a purity test. You have to. It just feels so.
Restrictive.
Yes, exactly.
It turns it into, are trans women black or white? And I don't mean that as race, but they're either black or white. No,
Like a false dichotomy.
They're gray.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole spectrum of gray between black and white.
Right.
There's an infinite spectrum of gray between black and white, if we're being honest.
Right. and by the way, I think that's true about all human beings, whether, what it's a gender question or not. No matter what it is, I think there's in the realm of human experience, I think, and I've actually started this came up in an episode or two before, I think, somehow, but just to go back to the linear spectrum that Tom Scott mentioned, a line, right? One, polar opposites. I kind of think what makes more sense is thinking beyond that and thinking of it more as a wheel, even, with different wedges, or even go further and it's a sphere. It's not just a, all these things tie in. We've just been talking about dimensions and stuff. And like, I think if we're talking about what does it mean to be a human being? What is the truth about the human condition, the human experience? The idea that, well, let's just confine it to this linear spectrum where it's one end or the other just seems so, again, not helpful, not accurate either. But I think I'm much more interested. I think we're much more likely to find these truths if we let go of simple binary thinking like that. If we appreciate, that gray area you're talking about, Tucker, that whole in between area. And if I think of it not just as a linear thing, not even just a circle, but like a sphere, it really helps. It helps me, appreciate the truth that could be out there, that it's so nuanced. It's not a simple binary thing. So the last thing I'll say about J.K. Rowling, again, there's way too much there. I'm really not interested in making this show about that. But I listened to a podcast I would recommend. It's called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. The host is Megan Phelps Roper. She's an ex-Westboro Baptist Church member. So,
I have listened to that, by the way, John. Stacey and I have heard that. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty even-handed. I thought it's like 6 episodes. I thought she did a good job, kind of, here's what's going on in the whole story of it, not just one-sided. I did see some feedback afterwards that it sounds like not everyone thought that. So, judge for yourself. But I thought it was really interesting, and there was a lot of background, and I think it really did. I thought she did a good job. The whole company, that production that put that together. So I'd recommend that. The other thing that I want to share that has been a factor in again, the way I've thought about how my brain is developed and why do I think the way I think and stuff. It's an audiobook that's called Conversations with God. It's by Neil Donald Walsh, and I heard about this from, believe it or not, Steve-O from Jackass. He has 2 memoirs, and I've only listened to the second one, and I would recommend listening to that more than the Conversations with God or the J.K. Rowling. But it is so fascinating to hear this dude at this point in his life and the experiences he's had, and like he just seems like, in that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like to hear the way he's talking about his self-realization and the way he's got to be like near the top of that pyramid, man. And it's really, really fascinating. He talks a lot about like meditation, but he mentioned that he listened to this Conversations with God. So that was, intriguing enough for me to take a listen. What I want to mention from it is, first of all, it's, I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but it's this guy, Neil Donald Walsh. It's his story. He was struggling in his life, I think in his like 40s, just got to a point where he was so frustrated. Why isn't things happening the way I thought they were going to happen? He couldn't sleep. He went down into his kitchen. He sat with like a tablet of paper, and he just started like writing these questions. Like, why isn't stuff happening the way I thought it would? Why is my life not working out like I expected? And he was, for like 15 minutes, just, stream of consciousness, just like writing questions. He stopped writing. He felt he couldn't put the pen down. This is from memory. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing a bit, but at some point he started hearing the answers in his head, and he felt compelled to start writing the answers as he was hearing it. And that's what the book is. So he calls it Conversations with God, and it's the audiobook's great because you can hear, Neil asking questions, and then God, who's actually voiced by both Ed Asner and Ellen Burstyn. So that was kind of neat. It goes in and out of like, it's not just one voice, you know, two voices kind of saying things. So it's really intriguing. It's very long, but it was really interesting. Okay, so thanks for letting me just go through that. The point I wanted to bring up from that is in the book, the Scott character says every choice, decision, action, everything can be traced back to its root source, which is a binary thing, which is either everything comes from one of two things. It either comes from love or from fear. It was powerful to read that. I don't know that I believe that, but you know, it was one of the only things that I kind of feel like, you know, maybe that's a binary I could get behind, that everything either comes from love or fear. By the way, I will say the audiobook I listened to was like a special edition. There was interspersed interviews with Neil Donald Walsh and a few other people. Ram Dass is part of those interviews, and it's great to hear people, you know, again, disagree. I don't know if it's a binary like that. It was really, really interesting, but I,
Hey, John,
you know, yeah.
Can I apologize, but can I ask one quick question here, which was, what is this gentleman's definition of love and fear? They're very, very used terms, and I think people use them interchangeably with other terms, and there's a lot there. Do you know
Sure.
Do you know what the concept of love and the
Yeah,
concept of fear was?
that is an excellent question. I'm not like prepared to like. The thing that stuck with me was that by the way, I know it's there. I know he if you listen to it, I'm sure Neil in these conversations asks that same question. What do you mean by love, right? Like I'm sure that's there. I honestly don't remember the detail of how he described it, beyond just the basic idea, I suppose, that like love. Yeah. Oh my God. We could do a whole 90 minutes talking about what love
Totally.
means.
Totally. Well, if everything boils down to love and fear, though, it's kind of an important point, I think.
Sure. Yeah. He says that's the divine dichotomy. That's how he describes it, is like the, you know, there may have been something that there isn't a universal objective. He may have said that. I would say my own, personal thought is, again, I don't think it's very helpful to try to assume that there is like an objective truth about what a human experiences, how a human experiences love, how a human experiences fear. To me, the whole thing is that it's not objective, it's subjective. We all experience it differently. And doesn't it seem more helpful if we can all get together and share the ideas and, be open to the people that disagree and like, actually, it's not that for me. And,
that, but here's my point, though. I back that up wholeheartedly. But my point is, when you're having a conversation and you're both using the same word, but you have different definitions. I'm not saying there's one definition. I'm not saying there should be one definition. I'm not saying it's objective. I'm saying it's the subjectivity requires the conversation about the definition.
Yeah,
at least to understand each other's point of view before you begin using it, because I think so much of the discord and strife in conversation comes from using a definition that people have that people have different definitions of.
Totally agree. Yeah. Again, how many times have I thought this? Like when people are fighting or arguing, and it's like, if you can find a common ground to start with, like there's much less chance that you're going to end up angry,
and
exactly. Hateful and violent. I mean, these things do seem like at a base level, they seem like they should be easy to avoid if we can start at this. This is a great spot to just share a quote from Irshad Manji, I've told you guys about. So she runs something called the Moral Courage College. She spoke at Progressive. I just want to, maybe it'll, I can go into more detail like later. But she has these amazing quotes, and this is a good spot to share this one. I saw that she said, "I can both stand my ground, and find common ground. That's not a contradiction. It's a delicious paradox.
Yeah.
That's exactly what. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
want to point out, like, I dig where that concept was going with it's all based off love and fear. But I do think that's human nature to try to make it binary. When I think the objective truth is, we've talked about it, everything in nature is on a spectrum, right? But it comes down to love, fear, and indifference. Because not picking a side is also picking a side.
Interesting.
And where this also fits into nature as a spectrum is those love, fear, and indifference emotions are different from person to person. Because where the indifference comes in is you should have made a choice. Maybe you should have feared one option, but you didn't. And that's still a choice. That still has effect on the future. But it's recognizing that there is no common ground on the big picture. There is 8 billion unique perspectives, and none of those align completely.
Yeah. I'm going to hit you guys with another quote. There's a lot of quotes and haikus in this agenda, by the way, but this ties in with that. The actor Sterling K. Brown, he says, empathy begins with understanding life from another person's perspective. Nobody has an objective experience of reality. It's all through our own individual prisms.
So even more, I love that, but even more so, I feel the starting point before the conversation even gets going is on the definition. And I don't mean to force the hand of agreeing on the definition. What I'm saying is, to Tucker's point, it's subjective. Certain things are subjectively defined, right? And so without having that foundation laid down of what is your definition of love and what is my definition of love, now we can not that we have to agree on the definition.
Exactly.
Well, I'm gonna throw a further curveball and say that there cannot be an objective view of reality because everybody has had a dream, which is your brain experiencing something that never actually happened. So
like
we all
in.
have things in our head that create this reality for us that is not based on actual physical events. There is no objective view. We have all hallucinated shit every night for our entire lives. There's no objective view. There is only subjective view.
I love that. We'll get into that when we do episodes about sleep. I know that's like something we were interested in going into. So yeah, that all ties in for sure. I want to kind of move into this section here about just things. So okay, I haven't really talked too much about like trans things. So I'm kind of just setting all this like foundation, I suppose, for where I'm coming from. And there's a few things that I just wouldn't have known if I didn't look into it. I want to start here with another quote. It's a favorite of mine. I've shared it with you guys before. It's about stereotypes. It goes, the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. And that's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's a Nigerian novelist. She has a TED Talk that where that quote comes from. That is incredible. I highly recommend that as well. The takeaway for me for this was, again, I don't remember really necessarily being taught that stereotypes are true or untrue or whatever. But I didn't think of it this way, that, it's not that they're untrue. It's that they're incomplete. This all ties into everyone's got this subjective experience of what it means to be a human, and this pitfall of a stereotype, convincing us or tricking us that this one story, that's the whole story, is just not helpful, not useful, not correct, really. Like, doesn't it seem more interesting to be aware of all of the flavors of those stories that are out there? So anyway, in line with that, I found out that there are 8 cultures across the planet with a history of recognizing more than 2 genders. I didn't know that. It was all but one of these I saw on a show on Hulu called Planet Sex, and then I looked into it. I didn't just, hey, look, the TV show said this, check it out. I did look into this thing, and I don't want you to take my word for it, so I'm going to put some links in the show notes. But I thought this was really fascinating. I had no idea. So in Oaxaca, Mexico, the Zapotec people, for 500 years, they've recognized 3 genders: men, women, and moo-shay. Naples, Italy, has a history of the femminielli. I might not be pronouncing that correctly, but the first written account goes back to the 16th century, and this was this like third gender, Native Americans, Two-Spirit people, in the long acronym LGBTQ IA plus 2S is in there. So you might see 2S in there. That's on the land that we live in America. That's the people that were here before the colonists came. They recognized that just because a person was born with a particular reproductive organ didn't slot them into this binary expression of, we use the word gender, that there was something else, the Two-Spirit thing. I found out that the term was coined in 1990, but most Native American tribes, had folks who were considered neither men nor women. They occupied a distinct alternative gender status. Samoan people they've recognized 4 genders since the early 20th century: men, women, fah-fah-feen-AY, sorry, and fah-fah-tah-ma. I apologize, I'm butchering the pronunciation of that. I even put a pronunciation key in. I'm not doing very well, am I? But so men, women, and then trans men and trans women, or those 4 genders. The Bugis people of Sulawesi, 600 years of culture accepting man, woman, trans woman, and non-binary. In Chile, Mapuche people, there's a word machi. It's the gender fluid. They're usually shamans. The machi gender is determined by their identity and spirituality, not by sex assigned at birth. A couple more here. And I was excited to share this with you guys. Have you heard the word mahu, the term mahu?
No.
And both of you have, Bob, I know Hawaii is a special place for you. That's the native Hawaiian word for the third gender. This is all things that have been part of the story of human experience for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the last one is in India. There's the Hijra, and I'm just going to read this couple parts out of the article that I'll link to. While recognition of genders outside male and female has only recently been discussed in Western societies, in Hindu society, people of non-binary gender expression have played important roles for over 2,000 years. And I have a little side note here. There was in this article, it said in 2014, it was estimated that around 3 million third gender people live in India alone. And I was thinking about, 3 million, but there's like 1 billion people. And so just a quick side tangent here about statistics. Isn't this interesting? I think this is interesting. And again, one of those things that I don't think I was taught this, but my brain developed to think sometimes that if I see a percentage like 3 million is what percentage of 1 billion? And by the way, 3 million in 2014, there's like 1 billion Indian people now. I don't know what the current count of, third gender people, but let's just for the argument here, 3 million people is what percentage of a billion? Less than 1%. It's like 0.3%.
Yeah.
So if I were to see that just alone, in India, less than 1% of people are trans. I think the way my brain had developed until I started thinking about this stuff was like, that's hardly anybody. It's like not even worth mentioning. It's less than 1%. Okay. But that's 3 million people. I think some would consider that a fuckload of people. It's certainly a shit ton of people. 3 million people is a lot of people. So, the way that the words sometimes play tricks on my brain, and I'm convinced, less than 1%, that's nothing. But it's not nothing. It's 3 million people.
Hey,
So,
John.
yeah.
Could I please ask for a quick conversation about two definitions?
Yeah.
The first one, because this goes back to, I think this is hand in glove of kind of what I was interested in with the gentleman's concept of love and fear. I'm not looking for an objective, but what are we defining as gender? Or what are you speaking of when you say gender? And secondly, culture.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, this is also something that I feel like is different than I think I grew up. I really, and again, going back to when I first saw anything about transgenderism at all and J.K. Rowling, I really tied gender to reproductive organ. I thought, and this will come into the next piece I'm going to go into, but I want to answer your question. So please let me know if I get this or not for you. Because again, conversation. I
don't
appreciate
think there's
the question.
a right or wrong. I'm just trying
Sure.
to figure out so that we're all on the same page
Yeah.
about what you're speaking to and what these definitions are qualified by. I think it's really, really important that we don't make assumptions on this.
Fair. Okay. So I like to use the Matrix to help describe this. The construct in the fourth Matrix movie, Morpheus describes it as the place between everything and nothing. And we've certainly talked about, this goes back to Anil Seth talking about we're hallucinating, reality when we're all hallucinating all the time. It's just that when we all agree on something, we call that the same hallucination, we call that reality. And social construction, like what do words mean? So for me, gender is an expression of what I guess is typically this is very like fuzzy, but it's there's like a typical, I guess, view of what male and female expression is. So, for example, and this ties in with the stereotypes too, right? Big, burly, bearded dude stuff, basic dude stuff. There's a guy on LinkedIn that does basic dude stuff. Fashion things, high heels, or in today's society. By the way, I'm really just kind of limiting this to, I guess, like my experience living in America, right? That there are things that I guess are typically associated with like more of like female expression. And so gender to me is the words we use words people can use to describe their experience in that kind of I'm not real comfortable saying this binary between male and female, but I think it's around there. You know what I mean? It's this for most people, just to use the India example, I think it's fair to say most people are cisgendered. Their expression, their experience kind of aligns with the which I would say is like a coincidence, but like it aligns with the reproductive organ they're born with. It's a baby is born, it's a boy, and here's these things that are generally boy things. Here's these things that are generally like girl things, and so gender to me, I think the baseline or where I want to start from is that it does have to do with like we use words like he, him, she, her, boy, girl, man, woman. These just are words to like describe a person's experience kind of in terms of those two kind of things. Which again, I don't know that I'm like super comfortable because I'm talking about a binary there, and I just went through like I don't think that's really helpful. So
I think I can make it a little more succinct. And okay, we have to pick two words. So we're gonna pick gender and sex. And we'll just say that sex is the organs you were born with, and gender is how you express yourself. And it gets a little more fuzzy than that, but I think the key point is that there is a difference. That
yeah,
that you're not, how you express yourself is not tied to the organs you were born with. And that's the big picture, is that it isn't just male female. And if you want to look at it from the gender perspective of how you express yourself, male or female, that's hasn't even stayed consistent with time. If you go back to the 1700s, it was the men who were wearing wigs and makeup
powder
and
faces,
high heels.
Sure, yeah.
And pink was the masculine color. Where if you brought that man into modern manly society, he would be a little sissy lala. You know, like it would not even be recognized as masculine.
Yeah. Well, I think for sure we could, you and I, because we grew up together, basically, Tucker, like that's kind of how we grew up, at least. Yeah,
Sure.
this to see like, you know, whatever. Yeah, thank you for being much more succinct. Thank you guys for letting me just ramble there. It was like kind of struggling. I don't want to cut you off, Tucker, but Bob, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on like your definition, the gender thing, and then we'll talk about the culture thing after that. But.
Sure, I gotta springboard off of what Tucker just said though, because it bright flashbulb went off in my head. I just finished listening to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. It's excellent.
I love him.
Okay, so he just did one on Alexander the Great. Okay, so this
sweet.
this is you know, these are Macedonians and Greeks, and this is, you know, 2200, 2300, 2400, 2500 years ago. Okay, and this is just to what you guys are talking about. So the guy who's behind the guy, so to speak, is Philip II. He's the king of Macedonia, and if there weren't an Alexander the Great, he'd be Philip the Great. Okay, this guy was just badass. Okay, this is the most fearsome, most lead from the front, most stab you, kill you, do what's got to be done kind of guy in the whole wide world. And he had 7 wives, at least seven wives. And he also had male lovers. And he's the most masculine motherfucker, one of the most masculine motherfuckers who have ever existed, you know, in the context of what we today currently culturally consider masculine. Somebody who would outdrink you, outfight you, outrun, everything, just everything you could think of. Okay, this guy was the guy. And this was not uncommon. So homosexuality in the ranks, okay, it was just, my point is not to get deep on Dan Carlin. Go listen to his podcast, everybody. Please just go listen to his podcast. It's fascinating beyond belief. But the point is, now we're going to jump into culture. Things do change. So let me go to my definition then. So I think culture is where it's at. And I am extremely eager to listen to what you guys have to say about culture. But let me answer you, John, about what I think we could write down as a definition of gender, maybe agree on. And let me preface it. I apologize. Let me preface it by saying I'm very into biology. I'm very. I have a biology degree. This is kind of my passion, evolution, biology. one of my passions. And my point is, almost everything today is arbitrarily constructed. There's almost nothing that is natural, quote unquote. There's almost nothing that is back to like the spectrum. Okay, but biology is a pure spectrum. I mean, it is the most spectrumy thing I think there is. And so having what I would consider gender to be is a strategy. Okay, gender strategy of adaptation. And my point is this, though, guys, as you've been speaking and I've been listening, all I can think of in my head is, because I'm walking around, I didn't make my shoes. I didn't even make up the idea of shoes. I didn't make my shirt. I didn't make up the idea of shirt. I didn't make up a phone. I didn't make up content. I didn't even make up the language that I speak and I think in right now. I've made up virtually nothing that I use in my day-to-day life as an adaptation to get me to where I am, a living human being today. I created almost none of it. Probably exactly none of it. It's all borrowed from a cultural well, a source of adaptations that we can draw upon. And we probably touched on this in the past, John, and it might have been in the old-timey podcast that we did about being able to share physical things and being able to share ideas, and why humans are so fabulously advanced on this planet, why we're the dominant species, is because we got to the level of information sharing that can be spread infinitely at no cost. There's no material aspect to the information level. So obviously, if I have 2 apples, I give you one. Now you have one, I have one. If I have 2 ideas, I can give you both. I didn't lose anything. And we can spread this an infinite number of times.
Yeah.
And so I firmly believe that what we would call masculinity or femininity or any other thing other than the biology itself, like Tucker said, is an adaptation, a strategy that individuals use in a group dynamic. Period. It's just, I think that's where we're at. But it dovetails very heavily, in my opinion, into culture. Meaning no one alive ever defined masculinity themselves. They've been educated on what this is. This is something that humans are built for, meaning we don't have a heavy level of instinct. We have a very long period of dependency as infants and children on our caregivers. We're one of the few species, I mean, other than literally the birth canal, our brains are about maximum capacity to get fit through the birth canal. And we're born because our brains get larger and larger as we develop. We're born in this very weak state, almost like a premature baby. In that other animals, when they're born, they could run almost immediately, or they could follow the herd, or they could do. So humans are built, mammals specifically, are built to have this dependency, because we have to have this extra food source. The mammary glands of the female has to nourish an immature, intentionally immature, a baby or infant that is unable to care for itself, where so many other animals are like fire and forget. I mean, salmon and frogs, they lay eggs, then the eggs are fertilized, and then they walk away. And these eggs hatch, and then they just have giant numbers of eggs, and every once in a while, 1% will survive, etc. And whatever. I mean, there's just so many strategies out there, is my point.
Yeah.
And our strategy is built upon adapting to cultural influences. Essentially, without culture as a symbiotic living organism, in my opinion, it's alive. Without this symbiotic living organism, all of our biology makes no sense at all.
That's true.
And then, that like consciousness comes in to this piece. This, you know what I mean? Like, because like you said, we're making all these things. We're kind of making it all up. That's why
arbitrarily.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't tie it back around, but the construct from the Matrix.
Yeah.
You know, we've made this up.
And
And
so
it has its utility when it's something like, this piece of paper in my wallet that has a one on it and a picture of George Washington. This is $1. This is worth $1. We all agree. We all hallucinate together. There's utility in that. There's usefulness. And it's just another thing of that, isn't it? I thank you for being patient while I was struggling to answer. Like, I feel like I was kind of rambling and struggling. So thank you for just being patient, just to listen. But yeah, and then thank you, Bob. You're a wordsmith. I really appreciate your ability. You have a skill and an art, and just like nailing things down into a very like you as well, Tucker. Like bite-sized chunks here. Succinct. I struggle with that myself sometimes. So thank you guys for that. So culture though now, Tucker, any thoughts about culture, like definition for you? Like,
Well, before I even go into that, like I want to point out that, and I don't have an exact number here. Google's coming out anywhere between 500 and 1,500 species, but there's documented evidence of, we'll just say 1,000. We'll pick right in the middle of 1,000 animal species displaying homosexual behavior. And it's probably much more shades of gray than that. We are calling it homosexual behavior, but are we documenting whether it's only homosexual behavior, or are they actually poly, or are they
sure.
This is not something unique to the human race. This is something inherent in biology on Earth.
Yeah.
That
And
sexuality, much like everything else in nature, is on a spectrum. And
yeah.
sure, you have people who are 100% on one side or 100% on the other, and that's fine. But that you can't ignore everybody who falls somewhere in the middle. Like they have as much right to be there as you do on either side.
Yeah. Certainly not a reason to again get like angry or violent or anything. Is just nonsense. Following that train of thought, because it's all this is just how it is. You know what I mean?
So
this
I
isn't,
guess
and it's not new. Oh yeah, go ahead.
What I would say on the culture thing is it does kind of boil down to that love fear thing, where that does, I mean, and the love and the fear, there's shades of gray of that, but we'll just take those two opposite sides of the spectrum. But if you're having a fear reaction to something, we're advanced enough as a species, you should be able to sit down with yourself and go, is the thing I'm afraid of actually going to harm me? Like, is this going to affect my life at all? And if the answer is no, then maybe you should be indifferent instead of fearful. Maybe you should just go, that doesn't affect me, and carry on with your day.
Yeah, I would add to that, like, is the thing I'm afraid of something I know much about from personal experience? Like, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but there's a really powerful, a beautiful kind of feel like a realization that I've had about this, things being real and experienced. So I'll hold off on that because I want to hear more about the culture thing. Oh, sorry, I was going to say back to just kind of the biological stuff with this isn't unique to the human species. This is, these things happen across all life. And what's interesting that I think is an important point here is, again, this isn't like a new thing for the human species either. What might be new is the visibility, the awareness, the talking about it in American society. You know what I mean? But this is not like a new thing that humans just started saying like, I don't fit into one or the other. I'm somewhere in between, or like I wasn't born with the reproductive organs that are generally this, and so I actually feel like more like this other thing. This isn't a new thing. So I just want to make that point. So for my 2 cents on the culture thing, maybe I can take a stab at trying to be succinct. It's like it's a record of how people have been living together, like in a society, like societal mores maybe, but like, how do people all experience this reality and and deal with the differences in the hallucinations, because all of our brains develop differently. We all come from different parents, and if there's a true thing or not about like genetic memory, we've talked about that a little bit. That's very fascinating to me, the whole nature nurture argument. Again, in my purview, it's not one or the other. It doesn't make a lot of sense to try to say, oh, it's only ever nature. There's no such thing as nurture. It's spectrum. Makes much more sense to me that for a given thing, it could be interesting and worthwhile to pursue. Like, where do I have this trait from? Is it something that I didn't have, like nature wise, but I have it anyway? My grandparents or somebody on my mom's side, like they were this, and that looks like that particular trait. Yeah, that might be uh, sorry, I think I was saying nature earlier and I meant nurture, but that might be a nature thing. That might become strictly from my DNA and my genes. But this other thing here, nobody in my family was into death metal. You know what I mean? So that was much more of a nurture thing, I suppose, like in my, experience of what kind of music people were listening to in my peer group. And you know what I mean? So, wow, that wasn't succinct at all, was it?
Well, it can't be. It can't be. But here's the other thing. Like, in a truly free society, there's no such thing as like a national culture or a human culture. Because when you look at a big enough picture of the human population, the number of traits that everybody will agree on gets fewer. The more
Yeah.
people you add, the less they have in common. Like, we can say American culture is baseball and patriotism and whatever, but not everybody's like that. There's white. We'll even go further. There's white Americans who are totally into Japanese anime culture. They're not. They're you have in a free society, you have to let everybody gravitate towards what interests them.
Yeah, the idea that you would legislate, no, you can't do that.
It's
You
silly.
can't be into
It's
that
crazy.
because your skin color is this, or you were born with this reproductive organ. You can't do, and that there is, I said the word legislation, and that's a whole other topic. I don't know if we'll get into that this episode. But an analogy that I like to use that ties in with what you just said, Tucker, is if the picture of the human condition was a puzzle, like you can imagine a puzzle with puzzle pieces. Like, dude, this puzzle, this thing, it's not a single scene. It's not, it's a wide panoramic of multiple scenes of 8 billion puzzle pieces. And that's a beautiful thing to me to think about. Like if there is a truth about what it means to be a human being, it's somewhere in this massive image of multiple scenes, multiple colors, multiple, you know because each piece is a human. There's 8 billion human beings.
And I can
You know
only
what I mean?
I can only be my piece. Like, I fit where I fit in that grand scheme. Like, doesn't matter how bad I want to be that corner piece, I can't. I'm just the piece that I am. And so is everybody else. Like,
Yeah.
the beauty is in the bigger picture that we all make together. But we can
Right.
only do that being
Together.
true to our honest self and being the piece that we are.
Nice. Bob, did you you did get into the culture thing? Was there more on the culture definition thing you wanted to?
I would just say, as succinctly as possible, it would be the living history of adaptations. So it's an evolutionarily beneficial layer that humans use. It's a tool, okay? It's a tool of adaptive abilities that we pass on historically, but it lives and it grows and it shrinks and it expands, and it's dynamic. But back to this concept of reinventing the wheel, if you will. How slow would our progress be competing not with one another, but competing with all the other plants and animals and microorganisms that use Earth as a spaceship to float through space on? How hard would it be if every generation, every individual had to reinvent everything all over again? It would be an impossible endeavor. And I'm going to call a little bit of a niche piece of biology that I'm fascinated in, and that's menopause. So, and we might have talked about this a couple episodes ago. I can't recall. I think I mentioned this. There are very few animals on this planet that have adapted menopause. It's human, and I think a handful of toothed whales, believe it or not. But the concept of having a competing member of a group, competitive for resources and space, food, sexual partners, etc., bonding pairs, all for the purpose of being a cultural bank, being a way to withdraw cultural information past the point of reproductive influence. Very few things on this world, very few organisms on this world get to have a period of life, of existence. I'm not just saying random. I'm saying it's evolved. It's an important evolutionary tool that we have in our culture, the ability to pass along information. Whales, like orcas, can do this. Many of these social animals can use this information. So imagine orcas trying to find their way along the coastline when there are ice flows, or how to follow, certain food sources, or what time of year. So there's really important layers of information that, if had to be relearned every generation, would be disastrous. And so the biology has adapted literally to the culture. The biology adapts to the fact that there's a cultural informational layer that the organism's group can rely upon historically over time. And it's a very powerful concept that we should respect and utilize. And let me just jump back. I'm jumping around a little bit here. I apologize, but let me jump back to what I consider an often overlooked part of our evolution, and that's hunter-gatherer. Okay, probably the 90%, maybe 90+% of modern humans' evolution has been in small bands, small tribes. And the reason why I bring this up is fear. Okay, we talk about being able to be indifferent now, and I love the point, Tucker. I will take the point. I think the point is hyper valid. But I also want to consider the evolutionary process as it relates to indifference. And I don't think there's much you can be indifferent at when you're not endowed with great wealth and riches on the cultural level. So we have this massive culture that is so strong and powerful, and it's learned from so many generations, and every discovery gets added upon, and it gets transmitted more and more freely one to another. There are different, like Japanese culture versus German culture versus Brazilian culture, whatever. I mean, there are differences, okay?
Sure.
But the ability to accumulate, say, an abstraction of your culture, meaning writing, the ability to transmit culture via electromagnetic radiation, like radio waves, or cellular communications, data, etc. All these things are massive evolutionary advantages that we kind of take for granted today. And maybe in the last 100, 200 years, let's say. Whereas if you look maybe back to Gutenberg, right, the printing press,
yeah, right.
probably the big turn. But go back in time and think about how on the edge a band of 200 would be when they didn't speak the language of any other band. You talk about, and this is where I'm going with this, guys. John, you brought up a really cool podcast. I can't remember the guy's name, David something. I apologize. About the neurochemistry of othering.
Yeah, Eagleman. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
Make your point. Yeah. We'll jump into that after. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But keep going.
There is a neurological adaptation. So I'm talking evolutionary, that it's not so much a choice when one is considered other or it's me, us, and them, right? So when it's me, it's obviously I'm good because I'm me. I'm the hero. When it's us, we're all good. We're all together. We're all in the same tribe. When it's them, fuck them. Okay, fuck them. And here's my point, guys. Humans lost the vast majority of our competition because we outcompeted them. The only competition left was other humans. So we are hyper adapted to fear other humans. Hyper adapted. We're also hyper adapted to love other humans because we're not individuals. We're part of a team. So an individual would die. You're essentially just, you don't even count. Okay. In the evolutionary sense, if you're an individual throughout much of human history. Now, by the way, I'm not saying individualism is bad. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying on the way humans have been built. Just like having wisdom teeth or something. You don't get a choice in this thing. You just get it. What I'm saying is we have developed a neurological pathway of those we love and those we fear. And I love the concept of indifference because I think it gets us past the biology level, which is what culture is for, is to lever up, lever our best ideas, our best concepts, our concepts when we're at rest, when we're not being chased by the tiger. We can use that clear thought, clear-headedness. We don't have to make a decision while we're being chased. That's one of our luxuries. I think we can use that, but I'm saying humans have evolved by being chased and chasing. And to discount that is, in my opinion, a blind spot that we have to guard against.
Yeah, that's fair. And all the more reason to have these conversations about that kind of stuff to not have that in the blind spot, for sure.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, nice. Just real quick on the biology topic, just the last piece here and the things I wouldn't have known unless I looked into it. Again, I grew up with this notion or belief from health class or whatever in elementary school or whatever. Chromosomes. X chromosome means girl. XY chromosome means boy. End of story. Well, it's more.
Oh wait, there's more.
Yeah. So and again, I'm not an expert. I don't have a biology degree. So I have a point that I'm going to get to here, but I want to read this this bit here that I found about the SRY gene, and it's as follows. There's something called 46XX testicular difference of sex development. Mouthful, but okay. So changes affecting the SRY gene have been found to cause 46XX testicular difference of sex development. Individuals with this condition have a female typical chromosome pattern, the XX, but develop male male sex characteristics, including testes, though they may be small and undescended. And I think, though the article doesn't say this, I think this is kind of tied into the I in LGBTQ IA+. I is for intersex. The term I think we grew up with was hermaphrodite. I don't think it's a case like you can't say that anymore. I think it's just intersex is more the common parlance. So I think this is around, related. So in most individuals with this 46XX testicular difference of sex development, the condition results from an abnormal exchange of genetic material between the Y chromosome and another chromosome, most often the X chromosome. This exchange occurs as a random event during the formation of sperm cells in the affected person's father. In this condition, the SRY gene, which is on the Y chromosome, is misplaced almost always on an X chromosome. A fetus with an X chromosome that carries the SRY gene will develop male sex characteristics despite not having a Y chromosome. So the point here is, I feel liberated in a way. I thought it was just very basic, simple X girl, XY boy, period. That's it. And, it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's more complicated than that. It's more nuanced. There's more to it than just that. People are looking into this. It's amazing. This is a good time for our species that we're learning more about this at a biological level. I think that's very fascinating that it's, things continue to be proven to me that it's much more complicated than this simple binary thing, And I'm going to go another layer here and get very personal. Despite the amazement I have over yes, we're learning more about getting closer to these potential objective truths about what is real and stuff. Let's see, how do I transition into this idea here? Okay, so I'll just say this first. The way I feel today, with my son who came out 2 years ago, as trans, and we've been using he/him pronouns. He's, living his, life presenting masculine because that's what he feels is his genuine, authentic truth of his experience as being a human being. So if one day, just go pure hypothetical here, if this is just based on how I feel today, because I'll get to this, but if we could, assume in the future, hypothetically, science finds the trans gene. Do you know what I mean? Which I don't know, maybe I'm making it fuzzy for a reason. I guess I probably am. But if my point is, if there was some blood tests where people could say, look, yeah, you have the trans gene, you're trans. You don't have the trans gene, you're not trans. And if my son got tested and you don't have the trans gene, I just can't see myself saying, oh, never mind then, you got to go back to being a girl. That just doesn't sound like a reasonable, logical thing. He's telling me what his experience is like. And I'm so grateful that he feels comfortable doing that, because I know that there's a lot of people that are going through this that aren't able to tell their family these things. And that's a whole nother thing. I don't want to get lost too much in that, because we definitely could. I have a lot of stories that I could share, kind of in an anonymous sense that I've heard from my job at Progressive and being part of the LGBT employee resource group. It's been fascinating to hear all of these stories. These are all these puzzle pieces that tell the whole truth about, if there is a singular truth, which I don't think there is, but all of these different stories. It's just it's been so helpful to not feel like I've been in some tiny bubble and I don't understand, and I just feel very fortunate is what I'm kind of getting at. Okay, so I wanted to say that, and then I want to jump into this section here that's going to reference the David Eagleman podcast that you mentioned, Bob. So I have this fascination, this difference that I believe is real for me, this difference in the way I think about things between things being hypothetical or theoretical and real. And I'll hit you with a haiku here. Ready? The difference between the theory and the realness, difference is feeling. And by the way, if you're counting syllables, one of my favorite things about writing haikus is the power of the apostrophe. You can eliminate syllables. So the difference is 3 syllables, but if you put an apostrophe after the second F, you get difference, 2 syllables. So anyway, I like haikus. Anyway, so the point here is that, you know, what I just said, like today, this is how I feel, but that's all hypothetical. Like in the moment, that's when I would know how I feel about it. And that's what happened when Jay came out. You know, what do I know about transgender stuff? You know, J.K. Rowling was getting grief and people were arguing. And, you know, at one point I was like, is there like an argument that like we're going to start calling a penis a vagina now? And by the way, that's not an argument that I've heard from anyone, but I wasn't aware. I just, all these things were sort of hypothetical. What do I feel about it? What do I, you know, like it was all based on like hypothetical theoretical when Jay came out, and like now it's my reality. I am the father of a human who is like saying this, I'm experiencing this like dysphoria. I feel ill in my body. And I was like, I could not have pretended to know what I would have felt like if somebody just said, what would you do if you met? I think this is a very powerful part of, I think, human experience, but certainly my own experience, that once, you know, just recognizing this difference that's probably there in the way that I feel about something, if it's hypothetical, theoretical, or if it's actually in my reality, and just trying to respect that difference. And for sure, being careful if I start feeling feelings of anger, hate, fear, you know, wanting to be violent, I think those are flags, red flags. Like, don't act on that. Chances are it's all in my head, and if it was a real thing, I would feel different. You know, this is a call for like curiosity. You know, going back to what you said earlier, Tucker, like when something isn't you know, known, it's on the fringes, it seems like the default that makes the most logical, rational, kind, compassionate sense is curiosity, not fear, not anger, not aggression. So thank you for letting me ramble on there. Okay, I'm going to keep rambling, sorry, but but this podcast that Bob mentioned, it's the Inner Cosmos podcast. David Eagleman is a neuroscientist and an author, and he's done a lot of really, really cool stuff. I've only listened to a handful, but they've all been really cool. And Bob, I know you've listened to more of his stuff. So he did this episode, it's episode 62, and it's called, Is It Possible to Rehumanize the Enemy? And the part that was just mind-blowing to me, again, I had no idea about any of this stuff, but people are looking into this, and research and studies are being done. So there was a study done on the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the region of the brain that becomes active when a subject is shown photographs of people. And in this study, this region showed. Oh, sorry, I should have prefaced this. He talks a lot about like in groups and out groups. So just those terms specifically, again, definitions, right? What do I mean by that? So this kind of ties in with some of the evolutionary stuff you were talking about, Bob. You know, we're kind of pre-wired to fear and love people, right? And in groups are your tribe, your family, your people that you're, you know, in your reality every day. You're in groups, right? Out groups are these other people that you hear about that you don't have in your reality bubble. You hear about like these people are doing this, and but you don't have any real experience. It may as well be hypothetical or theoretical. You're just hearing about it or seeing stories or maybe reading about it, right? But I think there is something very like profound here about that difference between the reality. So, okay, so back to this study on the prefrontal cortex. Okay, so this region of the brain, it showed much less activity, even to the point where it couldn't be measured when subjects were shown people from extreme outgroups. Truly, the science is there that people's brains work in a way that you can look at a human and not see a human. This podcast was incredible to hear this guy talk about like this is like a biological thing that our brains do. We can look at another human, we can look at somebody of the same species and not see them as an object. It's just like, no wonder people are fighting. It's, you know what I mean? And
It's like a hardwired empathy, if you will, right? Like a biological proclivity to empathize with people who look, sound, dress, act like you.
Sure.
Yeah. And, empathy, that's a whole, I feel like we could do a whole episode just about empathy. So, my conjecture, my position, or what I feel right now, what I feel like I've been thinking about a lot is like, dude, this all ties in with the subconscious stuff. Like I believe we have the power to reweight our subconscious model and like think about things and overcome, just because the medial prefrontal cortex does this. I don't think we're victims and slaves to it. I do think we can like overcome that and evolve, like help ourselves evolve to stop doing that, to recognize humans as humans, regardless if they're in our in-group or out-group. And I might be...
Hold on 1 second, please, if you will.
Sure.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Really go back and think about, what is a threat? What is a competition? What is an ally? What is someone on your team that's going to help you? Meaning, I think we can consciously overcome these feelings of othering if we can reweight our model to predict help and support from another human and not an other. So what I'm getting at is, as we develop, like, we could be born on the moon and we would just, this is natural, this is normal. Like, you wouldn't know. We could be born in the bottom of the ocean in a bubble, and we would get along. We would be indoctrinated into whatever the culture was that allows us to adapt and survive to these environments. So our ability to adapt is a function of our not having a hardwired adaptation. So our flexibility is what allows us to go into any environment and take it over and expand. But what I'm saying is, we are built to love the ones that are on our team that are going to help and support us. And we are built to fear those who are going to compete or harm us. We have to take that seriously.
Yeah.
We have to take that very seriously, because we're in this post-scarcity era where we don't have to rely upon this like zero-sum game concept that if you eat, then I'm going to go hungry. And if I have a baby, then your baby can't live because it's going to compete with my baby all the way down the line. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
And so what I'm getting at is, if the culture is this historical record, this history of adaptations at the informational level, realizing that we can compete cooperatively to, like, let me put it this way, a metaphor. We can have a football game and you test out running every play and I test out passing every play. At the end of the game, we see who wins, but nobody's going to die. We're not killing each other.
Yeah.
We can have competition of ideas, but at the end, we're all on the same team, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, and I can speak personally that being a white male growing up in Colorado, it's not terribly diverse. It's gotten better, it's changed over the years. And preconceptions that I had when I was younger, I have let go of, because having experienced more culture and cultures and different types of people, you get some of that backstory that breaks down those stereotypes. So personally, I can speak that this is something that, yes, our brain is hardwired to us and them. but you can overcome that. It is something you have to work on, and it's something
Yeah.
you have to be willing to take in those unique perspectives and those minority perspectives that are not part of your story, but is part of the human story. And you have to be able to internalize that to break those walls down.
Yeah.
And,
Look,
I have not seen this exact quote. I've looked it up. I can't see it attributed to anybody. So these are my words, but they are, I guarantee you, pieces of other people's quotes that just formed this sentence in my mind. But it's that ideology based on division will eventually be at odds with itself.
Yeah.
And you look at like America just post 9/11, the flags everywhere, the probably the most united as a country I've ever seen us, right?
Yeah. In our lifetime seems,
If
yeah.
we would have just taken over the world, wiped out every other non-American on earth after that, and repopulated the world with that unified American, we'd already be fighting each other again.
Yeah, right. It's not like, yeah, yeah, that seems very like reasonable, assumption to make that like, yeah, we'd still be fighting, um,
well,
because
hold on a second. It's not just fighting though. Like imagine today, post 9/11 or pre 9/11, or just wipe all the politics off the table. Go. Have you guys ever watched? I assume I'll raise my hand. I've never been in prison, but I've watched prison shows. They're divided. People in prison today, if you go to any prison today in America, you're going to have the whites, the blacks, the northern Mexicans, the southern Mexicans, and the others, or some kind of permutation thereof. My point is, when you have to adapt, survival is the most important thing. We're not talking about self-actualization yet. We're not talking about, individuality. We're talking about humans are animals. And if you put animals into a certain circumstance, these behaviors will become emergent. Does
It's,
anybody
it's gaming the system to come out ahead of the other.
Well, just to survive, not
Yeah.
even come out ahead. This is what I'm getting at. Like we're all talking about coming out ahead, and I'm not disagreeing. I would love to have indifference to points of view we disagree with, so that we can agree to disagree and get along. Because the small parts that we might disagree on vastly are underweighted compared to the things we would agree upon, and we could build a bigger team. And I'm 100% about that. But I'm saying there are realities where these hardwired, evolutionarily beneficial traits are dominant. And the luxury of being first world, of having enough food, having shelter, of having entertainment, of having stability, of all these things. Like I don't fear people coming and attacking me. I don't fear a lot of the things that we've evolved to fear because we've done away with them. And so here's what I'm getting at, guys. To try and convince someone in a fearful state, try to convince someone. Now, and let me get a poll. Do you guys agree, disagree with my characterization of prisons?
Yeah, to a
Oh,
large extent. Yeah, I think it is that way.
I'll go in the middle. I have no idea. I haven't heard that before. It's brand new. I don't know what I think about it, but it sounds. I mean, yeah.
Self-segregated, John. I'm saying self-segregation. It is not.
Yeah.
I mean, today in 2024 in June, it is self-segregated in a rigorous, strict way, such that if you were to go in as an individual into prison, you will be put into a group, whether you like it or not.
Wow, that is very interesting.
And you will not have the choice. Now, you do have the choice, by the way. You could choose to not do that, but you will be messed up badly, killed, maimed, ostracized. You will have to go. It's unlikely, if not impossible. I won't say impossible.
You have to pick a side, or every side will be against you.
There you go. Thank you, Tucker. That's the perfect way to put it. If you go in as an individual and try to hold that individuality where I'm good with everybody, everybody turns on you. You will get no protection. You will get no team. You will be ostracized by all and you will be vulnerable to the nth degree in the most vulnerable area. And this is not imposed. This is not like the prison system says this is the bunk for the white guys and the bunk for the black. No.
Oh,
That's
you're
not what
just
I'm
saying
saying.
that it's just how it.
The humans self-segregate into these groups of immutable characteristics. Okay, immutable characteristics.
I think there's a side carrot there where, and not 100% of the time, but the type of people who end up in prison have already probably started self-segregating before they got there. These are
Interesting.
and not everybody. Like there are,
Sure.
You throw a white collar criminal into a prison, they're gonna probably segregate to the race they are, but that might not have been who they were outside of that prison. But they had to make that choice going in. But many of the people who are already there were in an all black gang or an all Mexican gang or an all white gang type situation prior to getting there. That's why they're there.
I think there is a self-selection bias. I think you're right about that. I would agree with that. But really what I'm trying to pull out of the example is what a luxurious place we sit in the modern world. Meaning we have so many adaptations, cultural adaptations that can be applied to this game because we're not in fear for our lives every single day.
Mm.
And I think here's where I'm going with this, guys. If there is, because John, you've said a couple times, we should not be, and I agree, but we should not be fearful of others, aggressive towards others, violent towards others. 100% agree. But here's my point. Culture is an adaptation in and of itself. And if one were to go to say, I'm just going to do this at random. No, I haven't pre-thought this, but let's just say the Amish.
Mm.
And they have an internalized difference of culture, regardless of their surroundings. They have collectivized and said, we're holding the line here. This is our culture. Even if we're in the modern world, we're going to use buggies and we're going to not use candles instead of light bulbs all the way down the line. And they say, let's just say, I'm not really well versed on Amish, but I'm just using this as a real-time example. They value their cultural layer of adaptation for some reason that I don't know about. But let's just say it's life or death to them. And if I were to come in as a modern human with our culture of iPhones and Facebook and blah, 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 and I were to say, you know what? I need you to start using electricity, and I need you to start using cell phones, and I need you to start doing these things. I'm saying that one could conceive, if you thought your culture was life or death level, I could see a self-segregation event where people would team up and see everybody as another. And that would then trigger anger, fear, violence, etc. as a biological instance. Just like if I were to push you underwater, you would flail your arms and you would do anything because you're not really thinking. Just like when a bear chases you, you just run. You're not saying, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should. No, you're just running for your life. You're not thinking. You're not planning ahead. You're feeling and acting and reacting immediately. System 1, system 2 concept, right? System 1 is just it's just timely. And so what I'm getting at is a big picture, because I think we all agree in principle of what this background is people should have the freedom to agree to disagree and be themselves as an individual and contribute to the collective as they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think we're all on the same page. Now, how to do that? What I'm trying to get to is the level of fear that happens when a culture, let's just say a traditional culture. So back to the Amish, let's say they have a tradition that they have passed down, from generation to generation. And in their tradition, they believe this is the path. This is the way. And it might not even be on this world, by the way. Maybe it's after death.
Right.
Maybe it's something you can't even argue about.
Yeah.
And but what I'm getting at is when you put people in prison, whether you agree about the color coding or not, you're forced to pick a team, or all the teams will join forces against you because you are seen as a mutual other to everybody, and that's dangerous. So here's my final point. The ability to have people feel safe, and I mean not just physically safe, but at a cultural level. I don't have an answer to this. I'm just talking out loud. The ability to disengage that love-fear level and get towards the indifference level so that people can agree to disagree, or even agree just to have a conversation, set definition. We're going to talk as brothers and sisters amongst each other. We're going to have the ideas are not threatening, because there is a level where the idea is threatening if it impacts one's culture or if the idea triggers a physical response. And so I think it's going to be near impossible for the world to break the barriers, meaning the geographical, the national barriers, the cultural barriers, because it's hardwired. It's going to be near impossible until everybody can be made to feel safe.
Yeah, I agree. Safe, the whole concept of like safe space. I don't know if you guys have, I don't think there's time to go into that, but that is a powerful concept. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. I love the analogy there too about like somebody coming into an Amish culture and like, here, you have to use this phone or whatever, like electricity and stuff. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a safe space type of approach at all, does it? Like you have
well, it might
to
be easy. It might be easy for us, but it's life or death to them.
Yeah.
Well,
I just use
it's
us and them, by the way. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the us and them.
Mm-hmm.
Until we're all us, we're going to have a hard time, is what I'm saying. Until it's all us,
Yeah.
there's no them. Until that occurs, and the language is just so, it follows the natural order of evolution that we even have this word of them. Like, what if we didn't even have the word? Like, how would you think of them if there's no word for them?
It's almost hard to think that would even work. I mean, there'd be some expression, you know.
Let me take a step back real quick, and I'll relinquish. I just heard, I wish I knew the podcast. Oh my gosh, I wish I knew. There was this podcast about counting. Some tribe in the Amazon did not have a counting system for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They literally had a couple, like a handful or many. They didn't have, they had like one or two. There's like black, white, and they didn't have individual names for colors. These are humans. These are real human beings that had a vast array of language differences, such that I can't remember what it was. It was one of these last tribes that they were having a very difficult time building a communication bridge. Like you couldn't even figure out what the words meant, because this presupposition that they have a word for them or one. Like they literally didn't have a word for these concepts. They just didn't exist because they didn't need them. They never needed the concept of whatever this thing was. And so I think humans, using this abstraction layer of language, we assume, and now I'm not realistically saying get rid of them. That's not my point. My point is identifying how powerful the cultural layer is to form thoughts.
Yeah, and how integrated the language is in that, you know. We're getting close to time here. I kind of want to wrap up, but I feel like this is an appropriate or applicable here to what you just said, Bob, about like they didn't have words for stuff. In the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, there's just a kind of brief scene where the mom is kind of talking to her daughter about her daughter's girlfriend, who is, I think, implied that she's trans, because the mom at first says he, and the daughter is like, Becky's a she, mom. So then the mom goes, it's so much easier in Chinese. We don't have like words for he or her or whatever, something to that effect. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I looked into that. And in modern Chinese, third person pronouns for people, they have symbols for he and she, but they're both pronounced hey in Mandarin. So unlike he, him, she, her in English, spoken Mandarin does not identify the gender of the person because both pronouns sound exactly the same. Isn't that fascinating? Do you think it like ties in just what you said? Like
Yeah.
in
Just what I'm
Mandarin,
saying.
which by the
It's
way,
all-
like most human beings on the planet don't speak English, right? Or that's probably not the best way to say that. The language spoken by most human beings isn't English. I mean, according to Google, if you Google it, and so I, don't want to Dunning-Kruger myself here, but maybe it's very specific on like population count or whatever. But isn't that fascinating that just back to the social construction thing? It's a thing in English because we made it that way, but other
Correct.
cultures that use different languages didn't make it that way. They use the same sound. The language, the spoken language is the same sound, whether which gender it is. I just thought that was like mind
Well,
blowing.
and I want to bring up a story I read about this week that kind of solidified my thought on it, and it's that we are identifying that culture isn't as binary as we've treated it,
Yeah,
and we're not done having this conversation yet. We haven't
right.
figured out the right solution. And the story was about a woman who was at a gym. She's in the locker room, and a trans woman who still had a penis came in there and changed. And there was no interaction between the two. Nothing bad happened, but it made the woman very uncomfortable. And so she kind of asked about it at the front desk, and the front desk just said so and so identifies as a woman, and so she uses the women's locker room. Okay. So we've allowed the trans woman who is not comfortable in the male locker room to use the female. So all we did there was transfer the trans woman's discomfort to the other woman because now she's uncomfortable. Which discomfort is something I think we should just go, did it like really harm me? No. So I can probably leave that alone. But then I have to think about, what if that woman had been a rape victim?
Sure, right.
Because now we go from discomfort to traumatic.
Yeah.
And
Physical harm.
that is
right.
that is a real thing. And so clearly we have not figured this out. Like in a perfect society, we'd be Starship Troopers and we'd all just use the same. But we've kind of shown throughout human history we're not perfect people, and there's a lot of outliers who do horrible shit and cause this trauma. So, yeah, is it time for a third bathroom? Like, do we have innies, outies, and identifiers? Like, penises go here, vaginas go here, and if you're somewhere in the middle, use this third one.
Right. Yeah.
But I also understand that it's like the people in the middle are not a unified mindset.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So you push all them into a third restroom, there's going to be discomfort and trauma there. So like,
yeah, right.
What is the solution? The solution is to keep having the conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, I think if you guys don't mind, I think I want to try to wrap this up with some Irshad Manji quotes, because this is what she talks about. How do we have these conversations? We all three of us have said the importance of like having the conversations. How do we do that? Bob, you were alluding to that. Like maybe it's near impossible. I think is how you phrased it. It's got to be near impossible to actually make this cultural shift, this thing. And in many ways, I feel like I don't know anyone else who's thinking about this and has ideas that seem like definitely the right direction than Irshad Manji. She's just a amazing human being. So I'm gonna rapid fire through some of some quotes and then kind of try to wrap this up. But She says extremism on one side can't be moderated by extremism on the other. I think I've shared that with you guys before. I love that one. Be agile, not fragile.
Yep.
Be curious before deciding to be furious. Communication isn't just what we do with our mouths, it's what we do with our ears as well. Curiosity is the antidote to being offended. That's a good one. I really like the idea there. Again, curiosity is powerful to me. So, and then, to rumble effectively, be humble immediately. Before I say the last quote, so obviously there's, she's a poet. She's, the rhyming and the alliteration and stuff, like, it's all there. And this last quote, so her last book, it's called Don't Label Me, and she has a lot of interesting things to say about labels. And so this last quote is, if I ask sincere questions, that's when the label becomes a starting point, not a finish line. And so in the way that, these rhyming quotes and alliterative stuff, that sounds catchy. That's just the starting point, like a haiku. It's, the idea isn't like, mic drop, enough said, period. Here's the starting point. Here's some catchy few words that hopefully will like inspire curiosity to have these conversations. So two last things here that all tie together. The thing I didn't mention in the David Eagleman podcast about rehumanize the enemy, the last half is a conversation with a Palestinian and Israeli, who both shared stories of just looking at the other, as the enemy, right? That what we've been talking about. And they found a way to communicate and make this common ground. And to hear them talk together, it's just like, this is possible. I believe it is possible. I don't know that like I have a solution here, everybody do this, but I think it has a ton to do with finding this common ground, being curious, not furious, all these things with earshot. So the last thing here, and by the way, there was quite a bit more in the agenda that I didn't get to. So are you guys good for a part 2 next week to continue this? Kick ass. So this will be a nice tease, I think. So in the fun way that things kind of happen, things coming together, I've talked to you guys, I've talked to my wife about like, I'd love to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with the transgenderism thing, face to face kind of. I've had some conversations over the phone with some people, but I really haven't had a face to face. So Friday, just a couple days ago, before my wife and I are getting ready to leave the house, a neighbor from up the street comes and just like introduces himself, and he asks if I'm interested to sign a petition to put some measures on a ballot. And I was like, what kind of measures? And so I'm just kind of teasing it, but it was about laws and what the schools should or shouldn't be allowed to do when it comes to trans kids and their parents, the rights that parents have. And what I'll say is that despite the first moments of him saying this, despite my brain being like, oh, here we go, he's going to be talking about stuff I don't agree with, I was able to, even though Kim said she thought my tone maybe sounded a little like aggressive at first, and I do remember kind of feeling like I was shaking, but I was able to just like put that aside, listen to what he was saying, calm myself down, ask good questions, and it ended up being a really good conversation. I mean, I could tell we definitely didn't agree on a lot of things. I didn't share a ton. I mostly was asking questions. I hope, I hope I would have done Earshot proud, because I think I did. I definitely tried. It was just so amazing that like of all days for this to happen, 2 days before we're about to talk about this stuff, like here you go, have a face to face with somebody. How do you, see how that turns out? Yes.
John, may I just shine a bright light on this, because I was hoping we'd do a summarization. I'd have a chance at, and you kind of beat me to the punch here in that my understanding of what is happening, and we've talked about this many times on the pod when we talk about consciousness, the decision gets made first. Then you become consciously aware of what you feel like the right answer is. Then you narrate or rationalize a
right.
justification after the fact. And here's my point, brother. Awakening is the way to get past that initial feeling. Meaning, if we don't understand this thing is happening, if we're using our cultural weighting system of our to individually update our own model, build our own model by the cultural weights, we're going to feel a certain way, and it's shared by the group. And what I'm saying is, you just did the thing I was going to talk about, where you felt the thing, you understood what was happening, you used questions or curiosity to try to find out, why is this person differing in their weights than mine? Not just reacting and that they're now a threat to me or I'm in danger because of them, but why are they thinking something different than me? They must have different weights. They must have a different cultural layer, information layer, and trying to figure out, do I need to update? Do they need to update? What needs to happen here? And then actually having a conversation. I mean, this is beyond beautiful, what you just said. It's beyond the ultimate example of what we should all learn and aspire to do, which is to be awake.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm anxious to get into that conversation you guys had, because I know how I would have reacted.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
yeah, I don't, there's a lot of big feelings involved in this stuff. And,
Totally.
I think that there's a lot of misinformation, and I think there's a lot of intentional misinformation and projection from certain groups that muddy the waters quite a bit.
Yeah.
And a lot of it gets thrown under the guise of protecting the children, and sometimes the people saying that the loudest are the ones we should be looking at the closest. So
Well said. Yeah. Well said. This will be a good starting spot next week when we pick this up. We'll get into the nitty gritty about these laws he was talking about, and a lot of other things tie in here. So awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. I think I did a good job not crying. Some of this stuff I told you guys, or maybe I didn't tell you guys, but I was thinking like I should preempt my my crying and like watch Paddington 2 or something. I didn't have time to make that happen, so I was a little like, oh God, am I gonna just be like bawling over some of these things? Because both of you guys just I love the way you phrase things, and sometimes it's just overwhelming. And Bob, I think you said sometimes that this crying, we should do an episode about crying, obviously, but but this crying thing, when it's coming from this place of like gratitude, it's huge, it's powerful. It's just
crying and laughing are extremely important cues, involuntary cues that shine a bright light on our social nature and the fact that we have a lot of information transmissible one to another, or one to many even, that we're either not in control of or unaware of. But it is part of this big thing. It is part of this adaptation level that we use. And then, in my opinion, and this is me speaking from, I just recently awakened myself in this context, we think we're making the choices. We think we're deciding, meaning consciously, we think we have it all figured out. And until you told that story, because I teared up a little bit, John, when you told that story, because that's where I was going to go, and you give a real world example of doing the thing, which I think is the solution.
Thank you, Barry Center, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, Barry Center. This is, and by the way, all three of us, I think we're setting the example and the tone right here and right now with how it's done.
I think it's important to note too, like, everybody is entitled to be part of this conversation.
Exactly.
Like, I am a straight white male with no kids. I have no skin in this game at all. Like, I've got my situation figured out when it comes to sexuality. I know my story. But knowing that that's not other people's story doesn't harm me.
Right.
And
The
that's the
thing.
message from me. Like, I listen to a lot of a certain segment of our population, like they're shoving it down our throat. I have no skin in this game, and nothing that the the gay community has done has had a negative effect on my life. Not one thing.
Doesn't feel like it's being shoved down your throat, at least
I
sounds
do
like,
not
right?
feel attacked at all. Like,
Yeah.
I don't.
That lines up with my experience as well. Like the ERG, the Employee Resource Group at Progressive, has just been fantastic. And it's just, here's my story, people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like,
Let's just do a quick callback to the echo chamber. When you agree with everybody,
well
no
done.
progress. And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
throw stones here at all. I'm
No.
just saying
Yeah.
we have a mixture in real time occurring, unlike anything, cultural mixture, physical
Yeah.
mixture, ideological mixture in real time. This is democracy in real time. How do we solve? Because I love that story, Tucker. But how do we solve when we have the differences and we have fear of the other, and so that's where I'm getting to the John story of a real world, a literal physical person comes up and.
How do you not derail into like, oh, fuck you?
Well,
You
yeah,
know?
exactly. But because here's the thing, the biology says I'm in the woods with my group and we're all the echo chamber, as we should be. We're all unified. And then there's this other coming in and they're a threat now. Either they're a threat through competition or they're directly a threat to me physically because they see me as competition. And so being able to understand that circumstance, go through the feeling, because I don't think you can avoid it. Go through the feeling, understand what is happening, take the information from that feeling, and then begin the conversation. That's power. That's
And
true power.
I think that's what we are trying to push as a podcast, just as a bigger whole, that you are more than your reaction to something, and
Yes,
that
sir.
you have to analyze after the fact, and you have to face that fear and make judgments on whether that's a fear that is based in reality or a fear that's based off your subconscious reaction, your animal brains, yes, no, binary, make a quick decision.
Yes.
We have to grow beyond that as individuals so that we can grow beyond that as a culture, as a society, as a hopefully one day unified, more unified human race spreading out into the galaxy. We only do that coming together. We're never going to do that dividing each other into smaller groups.
Preach.
Bravo. Preach it,
Yeah.
man. Preach it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So yeah, next week, look forward to the continuation of this. I have a beautiful quote to finish out. But if in the meantime, if you do listen and have any thoughts, please send them to us, sendingpoets@gmail.com. Yeah, this is a great quote to finish this out. So again, thank you guys. This is from the author Arthur C. Brooks, and he says, "Being understood yourself starts with taking the trouble to understand others."